So it seems like a belief is like it's like an attitude attached to a perception.
Yeah,
so
it's a belief is that let's say we have a statement,
yeah.
and we attach to it a true value.
But this attaching of a true value, that's not objective, right? Like that's not an object of perception.
No, the object of perception is that I'm sitting on the chair, not levitating.
Yeah.
Unlikely I would have much wider audience. But that's so therefore there is gravity on the surface of the earth, right? So I can say then, yes, I believe there is gravity, but that's not a belief in the sense I am using the term belief. Because for me, it has become a fact because it has an experiential foundation, right? But casually would say, I believe there is gravity. We don't make a distinction casually between what is a proven fact, unlike Dirac, the famous physicist Dirac, another one of the great ones, and he was not saying anything unless it was a fact. So they were traveling by train with a friend, scientist, in the green British countryside, and the train drove by a flock of sheep. And the friend says, because the guy was silent, so the friend was getting bored, wanted to start a conversation. And he says, the sheep, they have been freshly shorn. And Dirac looks at the window and says, at least on this side. You see, that's a true scientist. So, yes, so difference between a belief or fact, he didn't deal with belief. Yeah, there was another story. I don't know, he gets a Nobel Prize or something like that. And they throw a big party, I don't know whether it at Cambridge or Oxford, I don't know where he was. And there is the minister in charge of science who is there, he's sitting next to Dirac, and Dirac silent, doesn't say anything. After a while, the minister tries to start a conversation, and look, it's a stupid thing when you try to start a conversation. You say always stupid things, So he looks outside, and there is wind moving the trees or the plants, and the minister says, "It's rather windy," and so out there. So Dirac stands up, goes to the window, opens the door, comes back, and says, "Indeed." So, fact versus belief, right? So, casually, we don't make often a distinction between both. But what I call belief is attaching the true value to something for which there is no evidence that it is a fact. Okay, that would be that. So in other words, it is. It corresponds to what I say, something that could be perceived, or something that refers to something that could be perceived, but no experiential verification of it. That would be the kind of belief I talk about here. So it's not just a thought. You see, I can have the thought, there are little, there are unicorns on the other side of the moon, because there is oxygen there is everything they need for survival. And that's truly a belief. You see? Because it has not been proven true. There are people, they believe the earth is flat.
I think the thing I'm struggling with is understanding the mechanism of belief, like how do we invest truth into a statement or perception?
How do we begin a belief? How do we start a belief?
Well, I can see how it might start, like the idea, like the belief that I'm separate, for example, could have started as a result of messages from my parents and from society, but I don't see how...
Think how you started, some kids started the belief in Santa Claus. Or in France, the belief that babies are created by cabbage. No, right? That in France, how babies, that's where they come from. Cabbage.
When I say that
the kids go to the garden every morning, see whether he has a little sister coming.
So when I say that I believe in Santa Claus, for example, right? It's not that first I think of Santa Claus and then I have a thought saying he is real. It's more that the first thought of Santa Claus is it's charged. It already has this like flavor or texture of this is real, this is true, I'm invested in it. But I don't understand like how that happens. I don't understand how that's different than just the thought Santa Claus.
Because I can have the thought Santa Claus without believing it. Perhaps you're different. Didn't get it. Maybe he still believes.
I don't know. I mean, I was just trying to go for for an example there, but maybe it didn't come across. Yesterday, you sort of alluded to belief as being about concepts or perceptions that there's some element of involvement by consciousness. That consciousness is there's love and interest in the concept.
There is always an involvement of consciousness with everything, right? True. It is consciousness that creates the substance of the belief, and it is consciousness that validates it as being true. But this validation of the belief as being true is different from the object we believe to be true. Because we can perceive the object without believing it to be true. We can understand Karl Marx without being a communist. We can understand Jesus walking on water without being a Christian. And perhaps you can be a Christian without believing that Jesus walked on water, or that he was born of a virgin. So these are examples of beliefs that are hard to substantiate.
So this is something that's volitional, right? I made I made a choice at some point in the past to invest truth into some idea or concept, and now I'm still doing it, but I realize that there's no evidence of the truth, so then the belief drops on its own.
Yes. At that moment, it potentially drops, but then it comes back because there's a form of automatism in the mind gets programmed through repetition. If we have been holding a belief to be a belief for a long time, even when we dismiss it through understanding, it tends to come back in an almost mechanical way. It is a leftover. In India, they have a beautiful image about this apparent leftover of ignorance that has been destroyed by a glimpse. And they compare it when you have a rope. It's not the story of the snake. When you have a rope, if you burn the rope, for a while, it keeps the cylindric shape of the rope up until the wind blows and everything is dissipated. So the idea is this: the glimpse burns the rope instantaneously, but it seems to keep some form of existence, of reality, for a while, up until these residues get blown away. So if we use this image, when we have this glimpse, we are liberated. And then the sadhana, now of Indian terms, the sadhana of the Jivan Mukta correspond to the blowing on the residue of the rope, so that it gradually disappears, its shape disappears, and we don't believe any longer that it has the potential to be used. We understand that it is useless, that it is absolutely ineffective. In particular, that there is no real entity, separate entity that has the power to do anything, to perceive anything. There is only one doer, one perceiver, one reality. But in a moment when we see the truth, the belief to be a separate entity disappears in this moment. It's just that we don't trust it. We don't trust the experience, so we have to go back to it, verify again and again and again. And that blows away the residues of the rope.
You've suggested that when
Another example, we were using ropes and snakes. You're walking in a room in the twilight. There is a rope on the floor. You believe it to be a snake. You are careful. You stop. You take your flashlight. You look at it. But your flashlight is not that good. You look at it, but you say, oh no, it's a rope, it's not a snake. You keep walking, and then you say, we never know. Let's look again. let's look again. Yeah. This metaphor comes directly from the rishis.
You've said before that when faced with a desire, we apply the question, would I have this desire if I did not believe to be a separate entity?
Exactly.
So I want to walk through like the mechanism of such a desire, like how that arises. So let's say it's a desire for ice cream, or let me make it much more visceral, like let's say a desire for sex, right? So the thought of sex comes up, and then with the thought so the thought itself is already not neutral, in that parts of it are distorted or appear more important than other parts. So it appears relevant to me. That's how a desire is. It's irrelevant to a me. I'm talking about like the case of a personal desire here. So it appears as though it's relevant. It appears as though it's about me, and that's just inherent in the thought. And at the same time, co-arising, there's feelings in the body, sensations in the body. So activation, right? Like the body is getting ready to go for it. It's
But
there's like
ask yourself the question: would this desire not arise unless I believe to be a separate consciousness? What is the answer to that? I'm talking about the desire. I'm not talking about the attachment to the desire, which
Right.
is very different.
Yeah, so I think the desire could still arise, but it wouldn't
Of course.
express the same way.
Of course, I guess animals have sexual desire too, right? It's very likely. They have hormones, they have all of that stuff, and they are perfectly equipped for that, like us, right? So it's completely natural.
Yeah, so when
So the answer to this question is very simple. Sexual desire is not, doesn't come from ignorance. No matter what the Pope can tell us, or the Pope or the local priest. But then, if I believe that my happiness, my inner peace is dependent upon the satisfaction of any desire, at that moment I have put into play, so to speak, ignorance. I can say my body needs it, perhaps the comfort, the well-being, whatever, or the peace of my body needs it, that's okay. But the piece of me, then I identify with the body at that moment.
So in this particular case, the belief that I need it for my happiness,
You need it for the, it's just desire for food, desire for, it's just that if you don't drink, if you don't eat, you die. If you don't have sex, you survive. So, of the basic needs of the body, it is the one that if you don't satisfy it, doesn't kill you. That's why religion have used it to control people. They want the people they control to survive. If they tell them, in order to be holy, don't drink, they are not going to have a big congregation because they would die like flies.
At the time that the desire arises, I'm not having the thought, I need this for my happiness. Like that's not explicit, right?
At the time, no, because in its native quality or state, the desire is often pure, often, not always, but often it is pure. But then when we become attached to its fulfillment, then it becomes personal at that moment.
So could you say something more about that, about how do we become attached to its fulfillment? Like, that's not arising as a perception, so like how do you see that?
It's because we believe ultimately that our happiness is dependent upon events and objects. Whereas true happiness has no cause. Even because we need to observe more the experience of happiness. When a desire for an object is satisfied, immediately we experience a fleeting moment of happiness. And pretty soon thereafter boredom comes, and then a new desire comes up, right? Which shows that we have got what we wanted. We should be happy if it was true that what we want brings us happiness, but our happiness is so short-lived that it was not really what we wanted. What we were seeking, in fact, is a desireless state which happens immediately after a desire has been fulfilled. At that moment, it's like a moment of understanding, there is a gap. Before that, Turiya, before that, there was a desire. Now the desire has disappeared. It disappears through its fulfillment. It's instantaneous, it's like an understanding. We experience at that moment the gap between the desire not being fulfilled and the desire being fulfilled. And in this gap we experience the absence of desire, the desireless state. So in a sense, each desire ultimately desires not an object, but it desires its own death. I repeat that. A desire really doesn't desire an object. It desires its own disappearance, which is the desireless state, which is in fact ananda, peace. When we understand that, the energy that we were wasting into the fulfillment of desires flows back to the source. It's liberated. It flows back to the source. That's Kundalini Yoga. In ignorance, it flows back, the desire, and gets lost to all the objects, all the nadis. Then, when Kundalini awakens, it flows back through Sushumna to the source. It gets oriented towards our state without desire, towards the desireless presence. Consciousness doesn't desire anything. Everything that appears in consciousness. Consciousness doesn't desire anything. It just happens. In order to desire something, you need to desire that which you are not, or something you don't have. That which is everything doesn't desire anything. It desires itself. That's the only thing. It's that which is love, loves itself. Love doesn't love objects, doesn't love stuff. It is for the sake of the wife, it's for the sake of the self that the wife is loved. It's not for the sake of the wife that the wife is loved. It's for the sake of the self. It's not for the sake of the son that the son is loved. It's for the sake of the self, etc. Yajnavalkya, Bradaranyaka Upanishad.
I feel like I'm still missing something about how desire functions. And what I'm trying to get at is like what level of reality desire is playing out on, because desire is not happening, it's not a phenomenon, neither is it the same as consciousness or reality or the noumenal. So I don't, and maybe I'm asking the wrong question in trying to put desire or belief into this picture. Yeah. I don't know where it is.
Let me take an example. Let's assume you want to buy a house. You love the house, but you're not sure you can afford it, and so you apply for a credit, for a loan. You're almost certain you're not going to get the loan. And then the answer comes, you get the loan, just barely you get the loan. And instantly you see, wow, yes, I can have the house. But you are not in the house yet, right? You need to close. But you are very happy. And then at some point you get the keys, you go to the house, and then, there is this problem here, I need to fix that, and then you see, geez, mortgage payments are very stiff, You start worrying, etc. So actually, you are in the house, right? It is a moment where you really have what you wanted, and the happiness is gone already. You see what I mean? Because the moment of happiness was when the desire for the house disappeared. It was when you knew you could buy it, at that moment the desire disappeared because you had it potentially. You see what I mean? At that moment, this desire and this uncertainty, can I have it? I know I can't. Oh, now I have it. Yeah. But you don't have the house, you don't enjoy the garden, you don't enjoy anything, you are living at Motel 6. Long American experience, right? You can tell I'm almost American. I am, but yeah, so, you see, I'm trying to show that the happiness comes from a different place. Often the great moments of happiness are just given to us. without desire, actually. Serendipity, something that happens, a bird that sings, whatever. Someone smiles at us. And going back to this story about a desire which is in its origin impersonal, then we kind of pollute it by making our happiness hostage of the fulfillment of this desire. And then later on, we don't care any longer. And you'll be surprised that life will kind of magically and profusely fulfill this desire. Magically, serendipitously, profusely fulfills this desire that you once had and you don't care much any longer. And you notice, yeah, now I have that. That's funny, you know. I desired it. It's beautiful, yeah, I can use it.
Does every desire start out that way? Does it all start out?
No. That's not what I said. There are desires that come directly from a sense of lack. Not out of thin air. They are desires, they wouldn't arise unless you believe to be a separate consciousness. They are kind of compensatory, you say, okay, I need that. It comes from a sense of lack. I don't know what I need. I feel bad. Okay, a Ferrari.
Okay, and here again, when you say sense of lack, that's also not, at a finer level, that's not phenomenal either, right?
It's not what?
Phenomenal.
Sense of lack.
Because, for example, I could have a sense...
No, it's not phenomenal because it's not just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because it's tied to a belief. It's tied to the belief to be separate. In other words,
Yeah, but then, see, this, I still don't have this clarity on, because a belief is also not phenomenal, right? So we have something that is non-phenomenal that is tied to something phenomenal. And
in a belief there is a phenomenal component, of course. But there is something, a kind of a will, an exercise of our freedom that decides it to be true, whereas we know to believe it to be true. This gives a true value. Wants to play the game of ignorance because it's exciting, because we have to know that to see myself as a person, it's great, you know. It's yummy.
so when you talk about that, giving it a true value and feeling this is great, is that happening as a thought? Is that happening as a bodily sensation, or is that kind of implicit?
Okay, you understand that a personal desire is the same thing as originate from the sense of lack, right? And the sense of lack is the sense that there is something other than me, right?
I agree with the definition.
Let's stay there for a moment.
Okay.
If everything is me, could there be a sense of lack?
No. Yeah.
Okay. So therefore, if there is a sense of lack, there is something lacking, and if something is lacking, it has to be something else than me. Therefore, if there is a sense of lack, there is ignorance. There's the same, I'm not whole and complete. If I'm not whole and complete, there is something outside of me that can make me whole and complete.
How is the sense of lack known?
How
is it known, the sense of lack?
That's very simple. When you have a desire, ask yourself, if I fulfill this desire, is it going to be the end of my misery?
Okay, so this is something that is implicit, and it's not known in the same way that I know this cup over here, or that I know a feeling in my
this
gut,
cup is
right?
a perception. We already decide that a desire is a mix. Is a mix. Just as in the Indian tradition, what is a jiva? It's a crude mixture of body and consciousness, right? But they don't belong to the same plane, to the same reality. And that's why we use discrimination, viveka, to separate them, and that's the churning of the sea of milk, right? You see what I mean?
Okay.
That separates the butter or whatever from the whey. So that discrimination, right? That separates that which is eternal from that which is impermanent, that which is real from what is an illusion, etc., etc. That's always this.
Okay, and then likewise, a belief. So when I believe something about myself being separate, that belief is a mixture of some phenomenon and consciousness giving it reality, right? Giving it truth.
Or the will of consciousness that comes from the ultimate freedom of consciousness is the ultimately free. And so free to choose, free to will, free. So it wills ignorance into existence. But when I speak like that, it's theoretical. What is important is to verify for ourselves experientially, okay, what is this desire? What is it made of? What is its nature? But would it be here? Still be here if I didn't believe to be a separate consciousness? In many cases you can say yes. I mean, if I am thirsty, it doesn't make any difference whether I believe to be a separate consciousness or not. I will be thirsty in both cases, because in this case, this desire refers to the body. Sexual desire, etc., all of that. If I'm in pain, desire for the pain to disappear. Yeah. It's a desire of the body. These are normal desires. They are not personal desire, because even if I don't believe to be a separate consciousness, this will appear. But there are others, desires that are not related to a need of the body, or even to a need of the mind, which can be legitimate. and that can be directly connected or seen as directly related to the belief to be a separate entity, a separate consciousness. And the investigation of personal desire, of ignorant desire, will reveal us all the elements of fear, because desire and fear are the same thing, right? That's clear. So all the network of fear, and trace it back, really in full light to ignorance, to this I belief, the I belief. But then the I belief itself, when discrimination takes place there, something has to give. And that which gives is never consciousness at that moment. What is not consciousness vanishes. And only consciousness remains in all its glory.